We're now broadcasting, Chairman.
Okay. Okay. Good morning. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching this live stream of this meeting via the Combined Authorities website. Due to government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Meetings Regulation 2020. The software allows you to choose a name when you join the meeting. So to members of the public, if you do not want to be identified, so choose a pseudonym. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the Combined Authority website. To enable this meeting to run orderly, that'll be a change, in an orderly manner, I will ask all members of this committee to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and keep their microphones muted, except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions, to make a comment, should indicate by clicking their raised hand function on the right-hand side of the screen and mute it again to allow officers to respond. As all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there are always a risk that we may run into technical difficulties, and I would ask for your patience if we do. I remind all members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded. So, members, I begin with calling the names of members of the committee to establish that they are here. So, Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
Present, Chair.
I have apologies from Mike Davey. Councillor Mike Davey. Councillor Every.
Present.
Councillor Nish.
Present.
Councillor Sargent.
Present.
Councillor Seaton.
Present.
Councillor Wilson.
Present.
And myself, John Holditch. As I said in the roll call, we have apologies from Councillor David. Councillor Sargent is attending the substitute. I have to ask you, does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory closure interest? Please click the raise hands function now on your screen. Now, if you wish to declare any interest. Councillor Seaton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As usual, I need to declare that my wife works for the College of West Anglia in the as an advisor to apprenticeships.
Thank you for that. I don't think there's anything on the agenda this morning that would affect that. So, right, we've been asked to approve the minutes of the meeting of the 14th of September as a correct record. Can I ask if any member who does not agree with the proposal to click the raised hand function on the right hand side of your screen now, please? No, I don't see anybody objecting to that, so I see no objections. So if the minutes are approved. Okay, on that basis, committee members happy to approve all the minutes and change. Again, I will ask if there's anybody who objects to use their raised hand function now. No. Over from committee, we have received a number of questions from the Overruled Scrutiny Committee, and a copy of the questions have been circulated electronically to all members of the committee in advance of the meeting. I will now read the questions in response at the start of the relevant items of the agenda. So, right, does the committee have any comments on the agenda plan? If you don't, raise your hand. Thank you very much. I don't see any comments. Thank you very much for that then. Right, there's some very long answers coming up here. So, we have received these questions from the Overruled Scrutiny Committee. I'm in the right place, Tamar, am I? No, I'm not, am I? Yes, I am. Tamar?
I can tell you are in the right place, Chair.
Right, okay, fine. So, the report at 3.5, 700 placements are achieved in the 6 authority areas. How are these placements distributed?
Oh, no, I should be sorry. Are we on 2.1 now? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to read the question out. Sorry.
Okay, I thought you did.
Sorry. The report at 3.5 suggests 700 placements are achievable in the 6 authority areas. How are these placements distributed across the authorities? Has the appetite for the initiative changed following on from the latest coronavirus lockdown and the potential impact on participating businesses? Payment profiles for the recruits to the scheme are potentially a sticking point. Wages are described at 3.2 as being refunded in arrears to potential employers by the Gateway organisation. Is this realistic considering the impact of the coronavirus lockdowns on the business sector and the ability of companies to fund 30 placements in arrears, circa 150k? Which sectors are most likely to provide these opportunities, and are they of sufficient size and liquidity?
Okay. Anybody want to go and make a cup of tea? Because this is a long answer. Okay. We've looked at businesses in the region to identify where likely demand can be expected from. We have used small and medium-sized enterprise, SMEs, data when assessing the demand due to the promotion of the scheme and the linkage to the Growth Hub. As a region, we have 36,045 active SMEs, which is broken down by the LAA as follows. Cambridge, 4,905, East Cambs, 4,160, Fenland, 3,515, Huntingdon, 7,895, Peterborough, 795, South Cambridgeshire, 8,475. Like reading an election result, isn't it? We've had over 200 businesses express an interest in the scheme, offering between 1 and 6 placements each. We believe that the conservative approach to engaging with 400 businesses will offer us 700 placement target, which is just 1.1% of the registered SMEs in the region. Once the skill brokerage team is operational, the businesses are engaged at a volume and split over LA areas, which become clearer. Whilst the second lockdown is no doubt having a profound effect on many businesses, there is still an appetite for the Kickstart scheme. Many businesses have expected interruption to their operation due to COVID and have been planning for and might mitigate the impact. There have been numerous discussions within the variety of sectors, and now remote placements could be offered as a flexibilities in working patterns applied to ensure social distancing is adhered to, whilst businesses are operating in initial payment offered to companies to allow them to factor in additional costs that offering a placement incurs. The scheme is set to run for 12 months with placements lasting 6 months. The timescale means that businesses are planning accessing the scheme at different times and see the scheme way supporting the economy recovery. That's a bit missing off this. The health and social care, manufacturing, construction SMEs registered in these sectors across the area. Construction 4,585, manufacturing 2,240, health social work 1,270. We're looking to seek funding for organisations offering less than 30 placements, and will bid for funding by coordinating 30 opportunities via multiple organisations. Payment in arrears was raised, and it's an issue in conversation with the Department of Work and Pensions, but also it's been agreed by central government for a national approach. So I'd now like to go to the report and ask Laura Keimer to introduce the report. Laura.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'd like to introduce agenda item 2.1, the Kickstart scheme. The Skills Committee is asked to recommend the Combined Authority Board approve the Business Growth Service to act as a gateway organisation to the Kickstart scheme in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area, and to approve that the Business Growth Service act as the primary referral partner to the Kickstart scheme for requests that are received into the CPCA. The 2 billion scheme was announced as part of the Plan for Jobs 2020 speech with the intention of creating up to 350,000 jobs. The scheme is a DWP initiative offering 6-month work placements for 16 to 24-year-olds with the ambition of them going into sustainable employment. businesses can access the 12-month scheme at little or no cost, which will in aid support economic recovery. DWP are encouraging the establishment of gateway organisations. These organisations should have experience in managing partnership arrangements and also have robust financial and governance structures. The organisations will coordinate placements for smaller organisations who are looking to secure less than 30 placements. To ensure a coordinated approach and in line with BEI's strategic desire, it's proposed that the Growth Hub act as a gateway organisation via the Business Growth Service. From a financial perspective, funding will flow from DWP to the Business Growth Service and onto the employer. Payment profiles remain at policy stage with DWP, but wages are to be paid by the employer and claimed back in arrears. Funding is split across 3 payments: £1,500 for a start payment, which is to fund the cost of training, uniform, onboarding costs, £300 for the gateway organisation to fund their activity, and then 25 hours per week is funded at national minimum wage for the placement period of 6 months. To ensure that payments are received by employers in a timely manner, it's proposed that funding flows via the Business Growth Service rather than the combined authority in the first instance. Regionally, there is the potential to secure 700 placements. With the initial payment plus the provision for an element of the training, there is the potential to generate revenue of £472,000 per annum. This will allow us to fund a team of critical mass that will be able to work across the 6 local authority areas to stimulate demand, working as a coordinated team to share best practice. Whilst funding would be received directly into the Business Growth Service, it's proposed that Kickstart metrics and performance will all be conducted as part of our wider contract management with the Business Growth Service. Without a coordinated approach, we fear there is a risk of having multiple representatives across the area and the initial impact to the economy being less. There would be a varied approach in capacity and capability, which could in turn give rise to reputational risk. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Laura. Very clear. Members, Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions really. One is our ability to resource this, and I see that you're going to have a distributed model, so I don't even know where these people will be based. Will they be based in local authority offices? So I'd appreciate a bit more information on that. But my main question really is recruitment for these Kickstart initiatives. So how would people find out about it? How do they apply for it? How are they recruited? And how do we make sure that the employers are recruiting on a fair basis to it? Because obviously if it's a government funded scheme, we want to make sure that it is fair in how it recruits people and how it's advertised, etc. Thank you.
John, you put your hand up. Do you want to answer that?
I'll have the first go. I'm sure Laura will correct me. So the reason we're putting this through the new Business Growth Service that goes live with a contract signature, we hope, on the 20th of this month, is that the Business Growth Service that has been commissioned and we presented last time we met includes the skills brokerage, and that's got around a dozen people in it that will be recruited over the next coming weeks. That will act as the primary connection between employers and learners, building up these cohorts of 30 people. That said, BEIS is keen for the Growth Hub to be the primary contact for business in all areas. So the Growth Hub will reactively handle inquiries that come in around Kickstart, and the skills brokerage teams will proactively promote it and actually go into companies and tell them about the scheme and try and build these cohorts of 30. In terms of fairness, the scrutiny committee question touched on this in terms of how many companies are in what sectors, how many companies are in which particular local authority area, and we would expect to launch this programme, be relatively demand driven initially, but then put a feedback loop in to make sure that we are actually servicing companies relatively evenly between sectors and place or local authorities. So we will be looking to do that. Laura, did I miss anything out?
I don't believe so. Councillor Sargent, does that answer your question?
I'm particularly interested in how it's going to be fair to learners and how we make sure that learners get a good opportunity
Okay.
to join the scheme, because obviously people need to know about it as much as anything, don't they? But also we want to make sure there's a fair recruitment.
Okay, so let me try and answer that for you. We've working in partnership with DWP, and I've spent some time with each of our regional Job Centre Plus offices in terms of them scoping out their caseloads of 16 to 24-year-olds, which are the demographic that are being targeted. We've had numerous questions in from employers where they've identified someone they may know, and we've directed them into Job Centre Plus because they all have to be engaged with a work coach. So in terms of that pipeline in, the attraction to the young people is being done through a DWP approach. In terms of making sure that they get the best opportunity within employers, we will be working on a level of due diligence, which will be making sure that we have employers that are offering out ethical opportunities. They're not employers that have made several redundancies and are now backfilling with kickstart opportunities. And within the training element part of it, through the proposition we're putting forward, we'd be working with specific training organisations to make sure that a level of training is maintained and is measured, rather than it being a very ad hoc approach delivered across multiple employers with no standardisation at all. So we believe there are several measures that we're putting in place, and we'll continue to work with DWP to ensure that there is clarity and sustainability for this programme.
Thank you, Laura. I'm sure that's reassuring. Councillor Wilson?
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, I was wondering how the 472,500 would be made up, but how that works out. In terms of how the payments will come in and go out, I would have found it really useful to have a flow chart, because I kept reading around that, trying to work out the journey that the money was going on. And also, with my knowledge of what's happened with DWP schemes in the past, who will make sure that the trainees are right for the company, and that what happens if the training opportunity breaks down? Will the trainee be penalised in terms of having their benefits stopped? Because I wouldn't like to see people going into these training schemes when it breaks down for whatever reason, whether it's the fault of the employer or the trainee, or just a mismatch, that people end up not getting their benefits because this isn't the right time for that to be happening. So it was just, I've got some concerns around that, really.
Laura, can you?
Yes, Councillor Wilson, I'll attempt to answer that. The 472,000 is made up of the £300 payment across 700 placements, and then also an element of, I think it was calculated around £375 for the provision of training. So via the brokerage service, to offer out some training that is funded through the initial £1,500, which there is a requirement to deliver training on that. In terms of how the payments will flow, because it's still a policy stage at the moment, it's very difficult for us to have a defined process flow on that. However, we are process flowing the full programme at this point in time. As soon as that's done, I will be able to share it with you, but we are a little bit inhibited because of it being a policy stage. And then to answer your question regarding making sure we have the right trainees on the programme, they'll be, in the initial part, matched by a DWP coach. So they're looking at the individual's background, they're looking at what their hopes and desires are for their future. And they're then looking at the opportunities the business present, but what the businesses are looking for in terms of a young person. They're then put forward for an interview process. So we are lining businesses up to make sure that they are realistic in what they're expecting these young people to do at interview stage, that they'll then go through an interview process as anybody would in terms of securing employment. Regarding them being penalised, my understanding is that if they don't continue for the full 6 months on their programme, it doesn't work out for either party involved, their benefits are not jeopardised. They go back on and continue to claim their benefits as they were originally. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, that's reassuring.
Thank you.
Okay, happy with your answers? Thank you. Councillor Niche?
Thank you, Chair. Fortunately, most of my questions have been answered, but just a couple of confirmations, really. I do really welcome this scheme, and I think my concern will be is the numbers involved could be massive. I mean, I think we've looked at it for Huntingdonshire, and we think, you know, could already be 1,600 applicants already looking at Huntingdonshire alone. So my worry, I suppose, is that there's enough resource in the growth company to facilitate this. And timeline is really difficult, and I don't know if you've got any updates on timeline. You've given a little bit there, and I think it is early. I suppose my overall one is, I think it's right. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it sits in the right area for the combined authorities to look at the whole. But I suppose it's just those concerns in the background and timings to actually get it kick-started, should we say?
I think that's a question for you, John.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Niche. We've made it very clear in the final stages of negotiation with the contractors for the wider business growth service that the number one service line to get mobilised is the skills brokerage, and within that, it is a kickstart scheme. They are absolutely clear that the first people they recruit have got to be doing this, because this is really live. And as you say, Councillor, there could be a lot of latent built up demand already. So in terms of focus, the consultants or contractors are really on it. Also, because it's retrospectively funded by volume, they are financially supported to scale as well. If it looks like the numbers coming in require more resource, they'll get paid by volume. So we haven't got a problem or a risk of them resourcing it at day one and then falling over because they can't continue to grow that resource. They can grow it as the numbers grow.
Thank you, members. I don't have anybody else indicating to speak. I think probably we had some very good presentation and some very good answers to your questions. So, and some good questions as a result. Do I have a proposer, please, to accept the recommendations? Somebody raise a hand for me, please. All right, then I'll propose it.
I do have my hand raised in two locations, Chair.
Oh, right, you got that hand up. Okay.
I've got both hands up.
Okay.
I have my hand up as well.
All right, okay. Rochelle, I'm sure you can sort it out between those two.
No problem, Chair.
All right. Do I have any objections then? No, I think that's comprehensive, Rochelle, is it not?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So I hadn't to go to a vote. So we move on to 3-1. Okay, in the right place, I think.
Yes.
Tamar, would
Yes,
you
you're
like
in the
to read the
correct
question, please?
Yeah. Okay. Paragraph 4.6 of the report recognises the potential impact of behaviour change as a result of the social distancing, particularly in a change from working in business premises to home working. How well placed are CPCA to support this more common and growing way of working with skills training for young people entering the world of work for the first time and for workers seeking new employment? How is this likely to be distributed across the CPCA area? Page 25 to 26 of the Local Economic Recovery Strategy, paragraph 2.4, gives 3 cases defining scenarios around the shape of recovery. With the second lockdown, as we now looking at a worst case scenario in this modelling. Are preparations fit for purpose and in place for the phases of recovery should the worst case scenario come to pass?
Thank you, Tamar. And the answer to the question is the Local Government Fund and the Capital Growth Fund, available by the Business Growth Service, will enable businesses to make a physical adaptations to their workforce. These grants could also be applied to fully embrace technologies to digitize, that's a word, isn't it, process, which is already emerging theme across manufacturing sector. The Growth Coaching Service will also fund specialist coaches, experts to help businesses plan and implement these types of fundamental changes to increase their resilience and acceleration their return previous productivity levels. The combined authority are very well placed to support the shift in our residents' ability to access learning that will result in employment opportunities or on further training with funding. Our adult education providers have been able to help social disadvantaged learners access laptops, tablets, and the internet, underspend from the first year's adult education delivery. We also now being utilised in levelling up the digital access agenda. The second lockdown will reduce the pace of recovery, but there are 3 possible scenarios of recovery should be largely unaffected on a macro scale. If the lockdown ends promptly in December, this is based on evidence that a large proportion of businesses will be better prepared for this lockdown and already accustomed to working remotely and efficiently. However, businesses in the sector such as hospitality, leisure, retail, especially independent and entertainment, along with the respective supply chains, will take a greater impact. So thank you very much. I think Brian Harland, you're going to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So back in September, we presented the first draft of the Local Economic Recovery Strategy. And this morning's agenda item is to present the latest version of the Local Economic Recovery Strategy, which has now been adapted to reflect 2 main activities that have been undertaken. The first activity that's been undertaken is a detailed analysis of all the latest insights into the economic and business impacts of COVID-19. And the second activity has been an analysis of all the planned interventions that we have put in the Local Economic Recovery Strategy. And this analysis is based on factors such as cost, funding availability, and the positive impact it will have over the 3 stages of the recovery life cycle. Now, both those activities have been conducted by our partners at Metro Dynamics, who are joining us today. So today, we're asking the Skills Committee to approve this latest version of the Local Economic Recovery Strategy. But before doing so, I will pass you across to Metro Dynamics, who can talk you through the main changes and the findings. Now, before they just start, I just want to stress that the Local Economic Recovery Strategy is indeed a live document, and it will be continually stress tested against the refreshed insights that we're now gaining on a weekly and monthly basis. And therefore, ourselves and Metro Dynamics will be looking to bring another version of the Local Economic Recovery Strategy in front of everybody around January. So with that intro, I'll just ask Patrick to join us and talk us through the Local Economic Recovery Strategy document from Metro Dynamics.
Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Chair, and morning, board members and committee members. Really, just to draw a few things out. So I don't want to talk for too long. I'm not going to use slides. I'm just going to kind of talk through a couple of points that in relation to the documents that you've got in your pack. I mean, the first is, and this is stating the obvious, but I think it's really worth saying. You know, recent events have shown that the approach you agreed in September of having a living and often revised and updated sort of recovery and renewal plan is absolutely the right thing to do. the economic situation has changed again since you last looked at your recovery plan. So it's absolutely right and sensible that the recovery plan should kind of change and evolve too. I think it's another reason why it's really important to carry on doing that is, we still do not yet know exactly what the impact on economic output and economic performance has been for the third quarter, because the statistics just aren't there yet. We have a bunch of leading indicators. We can look at what we think is going on, but nationally, we just don't know, and we have to keep kind of looking at the data every week, and then when ONS kind of update their output numbers. So it's really important to kind of keep this under review. And as we talked about at the last skills committee, and this is Councillor Holditch's kind of point when we last spoke, that actually are keeping our ear to the ground, keeping a really kind of close eye on what is going on in our business and our communities is absolutely the right strategy. So what the version you've got in front of you today does is to build that kind of flexibility in. It stays true to trying to keep a focus on your longer term kind of goals. None of that has changed. We haven't kind of rewritten any of the sort of longer term aims in this. What it does is to update some of the data, and then, as Brian says, to just kind of categorize some of the projects, because clearly the downside of a strategy that's continually evolving is that you might never actually deliver anything. So a few things to draw to your attention. So from page kind of 10 in the strategy, which I think is about page 72 in your paper pack, you'll see a table that groups the interventions and the actions that you previously agreed, and it prioritizes them according to whether they're already funded and how and when they're going to have impact. So primary interventions, the things that need doing now, which have already been funded and are already cracking, they're already on with, they're already happening out there, are the kind of first in the list, and they've kind of been grouped, separated, and can be kind of delivered, and and people are cracking on. And secondly, we've looked at kind of secondary interventions, those things which are not yet kind of fully funded, and where there is ongoing development work to do, but where there is good evidence that there's a really strong relationship between both your long-term objectives around changing the economic performance of different parts of the patch, and your long-term sort of output goals and recovery goals with kind of short-term recovery. So there's a series of secondary interventions there which will continue to be worked up as sort of new funding becomes available in the period ahead. And then there's a set of what we've called kind of tertiary interventions, which are those things which are probably absolutely right for kind of longer term development, may require some sort of policy change from government, or things which are sort of individual organisations can kind of consider kind of anyway, but aren't core to immediate kind of recovery and sort of economic survival and support for people. And so on. So we've chunked up the projects, so you can be really clear about the impact that they're having at different stages of the sort of economic sort of journey over the next kind of few months. Second thing we've done from kind of in the kind of next section from sort of page 18, 19 in the strategy onwards, which is page sort of kind of 82, 83 in your pack onwards, is just to update the data. And as Brian says, we now have a kind of dashboard which is which we can update kind of as soon as data becomes available, so we can be totally confident now that we have absolutely up to date available. And we've just kind of looked again at some of the scenarios, and again, as I said at the start, we don't exactly know. We will do later this week what the Q3 kind of impacts have been, but we can be pretty sure that our sort of V-shaped immediate recovery scenario is no longer credible, and we need to track through the economic impact of this kind of latest lockdown and Q3 to make sure that we keep kind of tweaking these kind of immediate intervention kind of projects. And I think I'll kind of leave it there. We've also updated, there's a more detailed annex which sets out the individual kind of projects in a bit more detail and categorizes them according to and structures, orders them according to the prioritization piece that I just talked through. So you can begin to see in more detail, how individual projects relate to either short-term recovery or longer-term kind of renewal. So I think I'll leave it there. Very happy to take any questions. And as Brian says, the aim very much is to lock in and deliver those things which have got funding and you've agreed now, and then to keep under review as we see what happens over the course of this lockdown and into early next year. So you can be sure that your recovery plan is meeting the kind of actual evolving economic and social situation.
Patrick, as you will be aware, this has come back from the last committee because it needed updating. Would it be a good idea if we had a standing item on this agenda to update this at our every skills meeting?
As mentioned, the intention very much is to bring another version of the strategy through to committees in the January round anyway, and that will be based on the latest insights and economic impacts that we'll be getting between now and then. So indeed, it will definitely be brought to you in January.
Okay, Councillor Sweeten.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to see that the long-term aims and objectives remain unchanged, but it is important we have this flexibility because of the very changing nature of the world at the moment. So I do fully support this paper, and I agree with the chair that we need regular updates, I think, because I think it's going to be a moving feast for some time to come. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Sargent next.
Thank you, Chair. It may be because I'm new, but I've got quite a few questions. I don't know if you want to take it in chunks or how you want to handle it, really.
Yeah, probably. Give us them all, and we'll sort them out.
Oh, will you? Well, I can separate them slightly because obviously you've got the interventions, but if I do the bits first of all before the interventions. So first of all, in terms of so this is page 55, and it's about targeting the reskilling and re-employment. But if we actually look further on at page 74, action 26, it actually says we don't know what sort of gaps there are. So I just want to know how we're going to target our reskilling. I've got a couple of more in that area. Obviously, a big part of the issue, particularly in terms of things like town centres, is around people working from home. But this also has an impact on the use of public transport and congestion and a whole range of other things, really. So do we have any forecasts for how this will happen? Have we been talking to employers about what their plans are in terms of working from home and what the impact that will have on the economy? But I think also it might have a benefit in terms of issues like congestion, which is obviously very important to us in Cambridge. And it's worth noting that at the moment, the peak isn't as sharp as it normally is in terms of traffic flow, for instance. It's more spread out. So I would say on that side, we need to encourage employers to carry on being flexible. And on page 63, the pillars seem quite long term that we've identified on page 63. What would be the timings on actually delivering on those? Because I feel as though they're quite a long way ahead before we can actually deliver on most of the pillars. That's my first stab, Chair.
Right. Okay, folks. Who's going to have a go at that? Brian? You're talking to yourself, mate. You're muted.
Beg your pardon. Okay. Just on the item, the middle item that you raised, Councillor Sargent, data on working from home. No, we don't have any insight yet only anecdotal feedback from employers that we're talking to. But certainly with the arrival of the Business Growth Service, we'll be better engaged than ever with our businesses and employers, I believe. I'm very confident of that, where such insight will be gleaned in real time. So that's the answer to that one. Can you just give me your other two questions again?
Well, the first one is how we target. We've got feedback, sorry. The first question was really about reskilling, and although at 4.4 on page 55, it says we're going to target the interventions. As I say, in one of the action points, number 26, it's saying we don't really know what the target is. So the question was, you know, how are we targeting when we don't really know where the gaps are, if you like? And the second one was around page 63 and the pillars, which to me seem quite long term. So are they actually relevant at this stage, or are they, you know, are there some of those which would be short term and medium term deliverables?
Cool. Okay, Brian, back to you.
Yeah, on the pillars are both near term. If you're referring to, I'm looking at page 67 of the document pack, the pillars under the mission, if we're talking about the same thing. Those 5 pillars are both immediate and longer term visions that we hold, and the interventions that we have listed in whichever category will be meeting either some or all of those visions, hence why they'll be in the local economic recovery strategy.
I think that was only a part of an answer.
Chair, I
Yeah, help him out, John.
We've already had feedback through the Leader Strategy workshop that the revised recovery strategy that we've got is missing exactly what you mentioned, Councillor Sargent, that the specific interventions need to have timescales on them. As you can imagine, those pillars, as Brian says, they are broad. They are the broad big five pillars in any industrial strategy. But the important thing is the individual interventions within each of those pillars. They do need to be specified in terms of when they'll mobilise and when they'll start to get impacts. And that has already been mentioned, and we're already getting that data, and that will be part of the January refresh, so that for every intervention you've got a timescale. This one is mobilised in November. It will expect these sort of results in March, for instance. That's that on the timing. On that skills targeting, in terms of the people being displaced, frankly, from some sectors and then having to be retrained and go into other sectors. We do have privileged access to HR1 information, which is basically the redundancy information. So we do know which people are being put through redundancy processes in which firms at what times. So we can make estimates of the skills requirements in terms of people losing their jobs, and also through the skills brokerage, we can engage with companies to understand who are the growers, who for instance in construction and online retail is taking people on, and what skills they need. So we do have a handle on both ends of the equation, the people becoming redundant, unfortunately, and available on the market, and the employers that want to take people on and what skills they need.
Happy with that, Councillor Sargent?
Yeah, obviously, I know it's a very difficult target to identify, and you know, if we are trying to support people who've lost their jobs, then it's obviously vital that we know what sectors have got opportunities. I think it is the biggest issue, isn't it, really? If I can just move on, Chair, with your indulgence. Just moving on to the actions, A10, which is on page 70/74, depending on whether you're looking at the page numbering or the number of pages in the pack, if you like. This is around the 125k investment into more resources into schools to better connect leavers with jobs. Now we know that young people are suffering more than most, if not all, in terms of the impact of COVID. And I couldn't quite work out if we're only spending £120 per learner and we've got 125k, it looks as though we're going to be only supporting 1,000 young people, which seems very low. So it may be very targeted, which may well be good, and the outcomes, if that's 1,000 getting into jobs, then that might be the answer, and that's a bit more reassuring. But I'd just like to know a little bit more about how that's being done. And moving on to page 71, it's not clear to me, and this is a big thing for Cambridge, is what the interventions are in terms of getting people back into the city and the various towns, and particularly on things like tourism. So we're going to have a massive continuing downturn with international travel, for instance, I'm sure, even if we get the vaccine in this country. So obviously things like staycations, etc., trying to get people to visit our cities and towns will be a large part of that, but it's not clear to me how we're going to be doing that to support what is in Cambridge, I think nearly 20% of the economy, for instance.
I think your last point is being dealt with by the Mayor's Forum, who's got both city centres on it, both Peterborough and Cambridge, trying to work out the way to build it back.
I understand that, John, but we've got A16 and A17, so I just wanted that fleshed out a little bit, if we can.
Okay. John?
Yeah. So I'll just deal with the 125k. The £120 per learner outcome there is actually taken from the Business Growth Service specification, and that's actually £120 per apprentice placed, because that is within the growth service and the skills brokerage. That is one of the key outcomes, 1,700, 1,800 apprenticeships over the 3 years of the programme. The 125k is actually spent on organising companies and entrepreneurs and employers to go into schools to give careers advice and pathway advice. So before COVID, that was fundamentally aimed at getting more young people in the last couple of years of their schooling to select and explore vocational pathways, and particularly apprenticeships, which is why we've got that that outcome. But one of the ways that we have adapted that process is that we're also looking to take that feedback from employers and from sectors on where the jobs are, and actually give appropriate advice and actually get appropriate employers into schools in the growth sectors, so that we can encourage younger people to move towards employment in the sectors that are growing. So that's the 125k careers enterprise company issue. The other item was that which intervention?
A16 and A17, John,
Yeah.
really around both visitor economy and city and town centres.
Yeah. A17 was I should say an ERDF grant that has already been taken up. That went very, very quickly, and that was for individual companies to make adaptations. As Councillor Holditch has said, Cambridge City and Peterborough City have also been in receipt of around £500,000 to make adaptations to attract people in. We are working with various local authorities who are looking to replace the visitor economy promotion organisation that did go, unfortunately, insolvent during the course of the summer. We're talking to one organisation who wants to create a county-wide visitor promotion organisation, and I'm also aware that South Cambs are looking at creating an individual focused visitor or promotion organisation there, and I think City are as well. So yes, we do very much understand that getting people back into particularly Cambridge, but also Peterborough and some of the towns is going to be a huge effort, and potentially now's not necessarily the time to lay the plans out for how that should happen. I think we've got to wait for the evidence over December, January, and see how the lockdowns and the restrictions pan out before we make a firm plan on how we're going to try and encourage people back into those towns. Thank you.
Just on the back of the age 17 intervention, that pot for the visitor economy, just to stress, that isn't the only grant pot that businesses in the visitor economy and hospitality can tap into. They will be able to tap into our other capital grant pots as well. But that was a specific pot, specifically ring-fenced to that sector. Alas, it wasn't sufficiently large, and it was oversubscribed numerous times over, but that is actually now being awarded out to the beneficiaries as we speak, that pot.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you were next, but you've taken your hand down.
John, I've got one more point, but I'm happy to come back after Councillor Wilson.
Okay, put your hand back up again, and I'll call you in the order. Councillor Wilson,
actually, this was just after Councillor Sargent. This is a very pernickety point in 4.3 on page 59 of the pack. I wouldn't normally bother with this, but it actually changes the meaning. In the third line, it says the people affected instead of affected, and that actually changes the meaning. I'm not a grammar nerd normally, but
that's a good point.
No, you're quite right. But to the bottom of the class for whoever wrote that bit.
Thank you for that. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just, really do broadly welcome this and the continued update, because I think it is a massively moving target. I particularly like the digital skills stuff that's looked in there. And I think really it'd be quite useful if we could see more specific sectorial solutions from a skills perspective, like you've done in construction. So I do broadly welcome it.
Thank you, John. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just moving to the last bit, which is really around the economy and the projections and all that sort of thing. But if I just reflect back to my previous questions, I'm very pleased that, we are engaging with employers. I was very concerned a couple of years ago with the Cambridge Science Park that they proudly said they were in contact with one primary school, and that was their only intervention. And, it just shows the gaps. And just to reflect on the city centre in Cambridge, one of the main visitor economy, it's not really visitors, but the language schools really have been highly impacted at the moment, which does actually bring a lot of money into the city. But just to moving on to the sort of projections, etc. It's interesting comparing with 2008 to 2012. And sort of there may be some lessons from that in terms of what's going to happen. But I did notice that in certain sectors, they'd found technology workarounds, which means they need less staff, which is something that, we've got to be conscious of, if you like, in terms of the changes that are going to happen. And certainly in terms of the graphs on GVA and employment, it feels to me as though GVA may come back up per head, but employment may start shrinking in certain sectors. So I'd be interested in the reflections on that, which may well help us in terms of the reskilling agenda and the areas where we think we ought to be targeting. So I know 1 or 2 areas have been mentioned, and I think those are national bits of information in terms of the areas where they potentially are not needing so many people because of technology. So I'd be interested in information on that. Booking.com is actually in my ward, so I'm aware of the fact that they're closing their centre, which employs 400 people. And I wondered if we had any more information on other employers who are perhaps consolidating and might be consolidating away from the area. So this is international companies, if you like, where they may say, well, we don't need 5 centres now, we're going to restructure to 3, and we might lose major employment sites such as Booking.com. Have we got any feel for that and its impact on the local economy? And my final issue really is around Brexit. There's no mention of farming, and obviously we don't know where we are in terms of a deal at the moment. But obviously if the tariffs are brought in, that could have a significant impact perhaps, but I don't know which sectors of farming. We hear about cheese tariffs, but are there sectors of the local farming economy where there might be a threat, if you like? And also with the Cambridge Eye, you know, there are concerns about research collaborations. So have we got any data on that, and perhaps loss of collaboration between UK universities and other research organisations and the rest of Europe, and what impact that might have? Thank you, Chair.
John, I'll ask you to have a stab at that. It's not necessarily in this paper, but is nevertheless some relevance.
Yeah, thank you. There's one at the end. I've got 5 questions there, and I can have a stab at them all. And I'll ask Patrick to just come up behind me on some of the detail. So question 1 was around getting employers into schools, and how we intend to have a step change in that. All 40 schools in the county will have employers and entrepreneurs in those schools through the skills brokerage that we're launching, and they are firm performance requirements within the contract we've got with the deliverer. So we are definitely putting companies into schools at much higher volumes than has previously been the case. But more to the point, Councillor Sargent, we'll be trying to put the right companies that are in growth sectors into those schools, and also growth sectors in terms of skills. Your second point was a lot of companies have created not just technical workarounds, but organisational workarounds on remote working. And I don't know whether I'll come to him afterwards. I don't know whether Patrick's got any national data on that, but certainly anecdotally, as we speak to hundreds and thousands of companies over the course of the year through the Growth Hub, we are definitely assuming, as you suggested, that productivity after COVID will actually go up, because there will be both technological and organisational changes that will affect our productivity and our work rate. And yes, that probably will mean a contributing factor to job losses, because there will be job losses through productivity, and companies that have shrunk down won't shrink back up necessarily to the same level of employees for the same output, which then makes growth more important, which is exactly why we're launching the growth service, to get the companies that have got potential for growth to grow, to compensate for that, for those losses. On Booking.com and bigger companies consolidating, the redundancy consultation information we have coming through at the moment is fairly well spread among medium-sized and small companies. Well, medium-sized, I should say. There's no big outlier in there that is taking 500 people into consultation at the moment. So for now, we don't have any visibility of another big organisation other than Booking.com doing a big redundancy programme. On Brexit, of course, my main point here is going to be that we don't know, and there's not a lot of point in trying to plan until we know what sort of deal we've got. What we are picking up from BEIS is that most of the issues around farming are not as problematic in the negotiations as fisheries, for instance. And we also know that part of the government's negotiation approach is definitely, and not least because of the huge lobby that the universities have put to the government, there will definitely be continued, as has been in the past, no change, participation in European research frameworks, such as the current Horizon 2020. We'll be participating on a slightly different way, like the Norwegians and the Swiss and the Israelis do, in that the funding that Europe normally gives us, as 50% funding for a research project, will actually come from the UK rather than from Europe. But of course, we won't be putting the money in to framework programme either. So we will be still participating just the same way. It's just that the money will come from Innovate UK to participate in a European project rather than from European framework programme. Patrick, did you want to pick up on any of those points about remote working?
Just before Patrick does, can I just add in also for you, Councillor Sargent, that whilst it is really difficult to know about the potential job losses coming down the pipe through the closure or consolidation of business facilities, one of the encouraging things is that through the Business Growth Service, we will have a much bigger army of frontline officers on the ground, talking to not only businesses, but also key partners across the patch, not just the business representative organisations, but private sector advisory functions like the accountants and the banks and the lawyers, who are an extremely valuable source of intelligence about what's happening on the ground. So that's hopefully something that will give some encouragement. And also within the Business Growth Service, there is going to be a much more robust inward investment service. And that inward investment service will be a proactive function to, number one, safeguard those jobs that might be under threat where there is a consolidation happening across the UK, so that we are stating the case to that head office why they should retain their Cambridge or Peterborough function. But in addition to that, the Inward Investment Service will also proactively work to plug the gaps created by any major closures. And on the topics of call centres, I know from personal experience that global facilities companies are always looking for decent sites that are oven ready in terms of their shape and size and technical infrastructure within the building, but also a ready to go workforce locally that can work in such environments. So hopefully, certainly we could be on the front foot with the Booking.com scenario. Sorry, Patrick.
No, I mean, just a couple of quick thoughts from me. So I mean, to reinforce the point that both John and Brian have made about the growth service and your wider work with individual sectors, then close dialogue with businesses and individual business sectors as they get their heads around the longer term implications of all this is really important, because that's how you'll know the kind of emerging, both the kind of emerging spatial implications and the emerging skills implications. And it's worth kind of, you know, just reassuring yourselves. I mean, you have other work going on to ensure that you're sticking close to those sectors and sector groups and things which will do that. So that very much needs to kind of continue through the next kind of few months. And I think you've got a good plan in place to do that, based on sort of, you know, my experience in other places. I think it's really important to bear in mind that the kind of some of the 2008, 2009 lessons that Councillor Sargent referred to, and this issue about the kind of tension between wanting rightly to keep people in jobs and to protect employment, and the government set out a kind of major scheme and major extended scheme to do that, with also not wanting to lock in kind of low productivity and business practices that, you know, are going to need to change anyway. Is getting that right is really important. And I think this is partly why you've got a kind of active, you know, strategy that you're keeping under review, because you want to absolutely get the balance right between identifying the companies which need to change, can change, are up for growth, and helping them do so, whilst trying to make sure that as people do come out of work, if they come out of work, they're helped very quickly, you know, into kind of new opportunities. And you don't want to just lock in a whole load of companies that actually kind of can change and need to change. And I think the only other thing that I was going to mention, of course, is that as we so far, I think you've seen some of the, you know, Fenland has been protected from some of the worst effects of COVID because of the ongoing role of farming and food production and kind of supply chain. And clearly, as we understand a bit more about, you know, the potential effects of any Brexit deal, as we know the details, then we're going to need to build that into the next kind of iteration of, you know, of this recovery plan. So I think we will know more, I hope, about that, you know, as we get into kind of January. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Patrick. It must be 3 years ago, I put a paper on tourism where Peterborough and Cambridge were talking to each other about having a Cambridge-wide tourist offer, because what I found staggering, Cambridge City told me that their average stay of a tourist was 3 hours. They just go around and look at the old buildings and they're off. And we needed to keep those people not only in Cambridge but in Peterborough to sort of do a Cambridgeshire-wide job. Unfortunately, I was asking for £1.5 million, and the Combined Authority couldn't find it at that point in time. But I think we've got to do that, and that's why I picked the Hilton Hotel on Flecken Keys, because they are quite happy to promote Peterborough internationally at all their hotels. Because they need to get people to come and stay there for the weekend. So I think that the door's open on getting people to work together to get a Cambridgeshire-wide tourism strategy. Anyway, John, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just to give committee members an update on that. We are actively working with at least one organisation that is trying to create a Cambridgeshire-wide promotion organisation. We don't have any money today, but we're hoping to have some more LGF in the summer, maybe the autumn. And certainly one of the projects in the pipeline is some sort of organisation that we can kick off to replace the one that has gone down in Cambridge, but to make it across the whole piece, just as you say, Councillor.
Quick word from you, Councillor Sargent.
This afternoon we got the Housing and Communities Committee, and I had to ask what the communities aspect was of it, and it was meant to be tourism strategy. So
well, there you go.
I'm interested to find out exactly where this all sits with the Combined Authority, so I will obviously raise it again this afternoon, actually. So that's
a little
segmented, because you know, as you rightly say, Chair, people do only come for 3 hours in Cambridge and don't stay and don't spend very much really. So we're trying to change the dynamics, but every time we give planning permission for a new hotel, everybody's up in arms. So it's a bit of a challenge.
I do appreciate that. Okay, folks, I don't have anybody else wishing to speak. So can I have a proposer, please? Raise your blue hand if you could, please. Right, councillors Niche and Seaton. Okay. Anybody against referring this updated report to the Combined Authority Board? Or are you all in agreement? If you are disagreeing, please raise your hand now. Okay, Rochelle, happy with that?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. The next item is where we have another question, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Historically, further education provision has been the Cinderella of education. The announced additional infrastructure funding of 1.5 billion to upgrade the national FE estate is good news. Moving 2.5 billion of funding for FE training across the local arrangements and away from central government is also very much to be welcomed. What level of additional funding capable of local distribution do the committee feel would enable a localised lifetime skills programme to adequately support the region's learners under the 3 scenarios posed by the local economic recovery strategy in paragraph 2.4? What proportion of the available funding will we need to enable the lifetime skills guarantee to work for our residents?
Okay, and the answer to that, this is a subject of evidence gathering and negotiation with the Department of Education and officers. We'll report back when the evidence can support the specific bid for funding and we have received a reaction from the Department of Education on the potential devolution of it. The report now will be introduced by Janet Warren. Welcome,
Hi.
Janet.
Hello, good morning. I'm going to provide an update for the committee on a paper, Lifetime Skills Guarantee and Post-16 Education Reform. A lifetime skills statement was recently delivered by Gavin Williamson, Secretary of State for Education, early in October. It's been announced as the backbone of COVID recovery, with intentions to raise the status of further and technical vocational education, bringing closer the alignment between further education and higher education. The reforms are designed to improve the quality of higher technical education on offer and encourage more people to take technical education courses to enable them to develop the skills required by employers to secure higher skilled technical roles. Not every student has the desire to attend university. This is about giving them the choice in which route they take in their further education. To support reforms in technical education, the government has announced £1.5 billion to upgrade existing further education estates in England and £2.5 billion for a national skills fund to help adults and employers access training. Earlier in September, the Prime Minister announced a lifetime skills guarantee, which would offer a fully funded level 3 qualification, which is an A-level equivalent for those aged over 18 without an A-level or equivalent qualification. This guarantee will be funded via the National Skills Fund. Whilst both are still at policy stage, CPCA, along with the other 8 mayoral combined authorities, known collectively as the M9, are lobbying for devolved budgets of both the National Skills Fund and the FE Capital Upgrade Fund to allow for greater localised control and maximise outputs that meet labour market requirements of the CPCA. The government is now going to consult on these proposals next year. and we are awaiting the publication of an FE white paper, which is due any time later this year. It will look at post-16 education and training and will set out how the government will reset the balance between further and higher education. Devolved employment and skills provision have had real impact across our areas, enabling decisions focused on driving better outcomes for individual economies. The improvement of skills levels in people and availability across businesses has been embedded within local and national economic development and recovery planning for some time. This importance is acknowledged within the devolution deals that all M9 authorities have put in place. With devolution of the adult education budget and greater responsibility for local cohered and delivered employment and skills activity included as a given, the principles applied to the devolved adult education budget should be replicated for the National Skills Fund. We have requested engagement with government officials on the detail of the lifetime skills guarantee as a matter of urgency. This should include devolving new funding for adult skills, as well as co-designing the lifetime skills guarantee's other components, such as boosting apprenticeships. Should a devolution deal not come to fruition, the CPCA will need to ensure that we can best support, guide and advise providers of labour market needs via the local economic recovery strategy and skills advisory panel to influence the regional delivery and to ensure it is fit for purpose. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Janet. I have a question from Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions. As this is looking at people who may have already been in work and been made redundant post-COVID, will there be provision for childcare for people to attend to these courses? And also, my other question is, I know in the past there's been a gap between people wanting to reskill and their requirement to be actively seeking work to continue to get their benefits. So it really needs some sort of arrangement where people can attend these courses and not be required to actively seek work to continue to get their benefits. So I'm wondering if the combined authority is going to respond along those lines. So that I think there may be several issues around this where people I know in the past have wanted to reskill and have wanted to train, and they've just fallen foul of the benefit laws. So it's really that, and also people with caring responsibilities, how they will be able to take the time to attend courses and to retrain. So it's just issues around that really that I'm concerned about.
Can you take that, Janet?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilson. We're already aware of childcare payments being supported via the additional learning support funding that takes place within education. This will continue to be supported. And really these updates are at very high level policy stage at the moment. So it's something that we'll take forwards and bear in mind for when we're getting down to the planning stages. We work very closely with DWP colleagues. So we will, I'll keep this as a good highlight for us to take forwards. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Councillor Avery. Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, hi Janet, welcome. Could I just refer you to the FE Infrastructure Fund, which are points 29 to 10 in the document? Because although this is a high-flying document and it's strategy at the highest possible level in terms of policy, 2.9 and 2.10 do look as if there's should be things happening now, and I just wanted some clarification on that. So it says the 1.5 billion fund will support FE colleges to undertake immediate remedial work in this financial year to upgrade the condition of their estate. And I wondered if you could clarify what is meant by immediate and remedial in that, but also in 210, that money has been allocated already in this financial year to eligible colleges. And I just wondered, which of these colleges and what impact is that going to have locally? Because obviously these are all our local colleges, and I'll be expecting a lot of building work between now and next April. It just seems a lack of clarity. One's a high level policy document, another is you've got things going on the ground. Could you clarify what's actually going to be going on the ground and what impact that will have for our learners?
Of course. Thank you, Councillor Avery. Apologies for the confusion there. You are correct. It is high level and there is some local level detail there, and my apologies in advance. I don't have the detail to hand in my immediate memory. However, I'm aware, I think there's around 2 million already released in our locality. I'm aware that Cambridge Regional College, West Suffolk College on our borders, they've already received some money from the government, and they're trying to put plans in place to spend this now. But one of the issues they've highlighted is the fact that it's came in to them quite out of the blue, and they've got quite timescales in order to put plans in place and spend the money, which is why we are lobbying for further devolution of these sorts of funds to be able to work with providers on a much closer local level.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But if there are things happening, I think this committee should know what's happening locally, because it does have an impact on our local learners and those youngsters who are about to put in their options for post-16 transfer and so on. Is it possible that we could have some information come back to the committee, please?
Yes, if that's your wish, we'll do that.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yep. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I want to mainly focus on the post-16 reform, which we haven't gone into too much detail about. But I mean, first note really, obviously, is how, as it says in the report, that further education has been treated as a Cinderella area with the cuts that have been identified. And it's not just in terms of numbers, if you like. You know, I know the staff at FE colleges feel less valued than people in secondary schools and people in higher education, for instance. So we do need to give it a massive uplift, I believe. So it's not seen as a more marginal form of education. But it's interesting that the Prime Minister went to Exeter College. It's not Exeter College in Oxford, it's Exeter College in Exeter, which is where I'm from. And that actually was the first FE college in the country back in 1970. And it has got outstanding from Ofsted, which is perhaps why he's chosen it. But the important point I want to make is it's a college which provides all the sixth form education and beyond in Exeter. So both academic and vocational. And if we look at the Cambridge situation, where we've got Long Road and Hills Road on the south of the city and CRC in the north, with a big gap in between, if you like. It does stress to me the need to have a more integrated approach to post-16 education, and perhaps even that people can flow between a level of academic and a level of vocational training. But at the moment, we certainly have them as two separate buckets. If you go to Hills Road, you'll definitely go to university if you like, while if you go to CRC, you may well not. In fact, both my brother and sister went to Exeter College from secondary modern school at the time and went on to university. And I think we've got to have a much more integrated approach to post-16 education and training than we have currently, because at the moment, you know, people end up in separate buckets. And I think we've got to move away from that and obviously value vocational as much as academic, really.
I'm not sure that's in our control in terms of schools do most of the 16 plus stuff. And the situation is different in Peterborough is in Cambridge, because you do have sixth form colleges where we don't in Peterborough. I'm not sure how Huntingdon are, but they are, but what is happening, sixth form, I think provision is shrinking because they can't get the teachers to do the specialist subject. And also there's a bit of rivalry between different schools because parents pick schools or tend to pick schools on their exam results. And that's not always the best way for a young person. It's where the bad person can thrive. But I don't know whether you want to comment on that, Janet?
Thank you, Councillor Sargent, for your comments and for your views there. That was, you know, it really echoes why this is so at the heart of what people are thinking and feeling at the moment coming out of COVID, retraining, thinking about people's futures. We are waiting on the white paper that's going to set out the policy that will allow the planning stages underneath all of this. But the Secretary of State for Education has been clear. The government wants to give people the opportunity to retrain and upskill at any point in their working lives. So we certainly echo your thoughts.
Councillor Seaton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's also worth noting that there are some schools that will not even allow FE to go in and talk to their pupils. There is some sort of conflict sometimes between schools and FE colleges fighting after the same thing. So I think we have to bear that in mind, that, you know, one, they're both trying to actually offer the same sort of opportunities, which doesn't help.
I agree. Okay, are you happy to note the report? Give us a proposer, please. All right, Chris and Councillor Wilson. Is there any objection to a note in the report? None, and thank you very much. Once again, good debate. Thank you, Janet. And that's your first report to committee. Well done.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move on now. If I can separate my bits of paper to Vanessa.
Chair, sorry, we are on item 3.3.
Yeah, that was Janet, yeah?
Yeah.
Would-
It's
I've just
Janet
asked-
again.
Oh, it's Janet again. All right, sorry. I took that as all one thing. So Janet, you're next in line then, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an update again on the Employment and Skills Board, also known as Skills Advisory Panel. The group met again on, excuse me.
Can you start again, love? Because I think you were muted. We never heard the beginning.
Apologies, Chair. I'd just like to provide an update for the committee on the Employment and Skills Board, also known as a Skills Advisory Panel. The group met again on the 13th of October with 20 members in virtual attendance and 7 apologies. The meeting is led by the new chair, Al Kingsley, who has recently been nominated by the Business Board. The meeting was Al's second meeting which he led. The Employment and Skills Board is made up of members of the local employment and education community groups. Al is a managing director for an organisation called Net Support. Other members include Pat Carrington, executive principal for City College Peterborough, working across Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council. You also have the principal of Cambridge Regional College, Department for Work and Pensions district manager, Education Skills and Skills Funding Agency, head of the East of England territorial team, various business members, education colleagues and CPCA officers. It was a productive meeting with a number of presentations for discussion, apologies, to highlight a few of these for you. The group heard from Jane Patterson Todd, the Chief Executive at Cambridge Ahead. The presentation set out the key findings and actions to be taken forward on a careers guidance research piece conducted by Cambridge Ahead. They would like government to work with local mayors to develop a funding pilot for dedicated career education advice within secondary schools, aligned and complementary with local skills service initiatives. Business networks and representative groups to take a lead in working with employers and providers to build better connections between business and schools and pilot new work experience and industry placements. Other items to note were an update presentation on the Health and Care Sector Work Academy run by City College Peterborough at Pat Carrington. There was also a lifelong learning week last week that took place. City College won an award, a New Directions award for all of their learners there. So our mayor very recently last week was able to record a message of gratitude and congratulations for the learner there. It really highlights the effectiveness of the scheme that's taking place there in Peterborough. 636 learners have enrolled and started, with over 340 now completed the programme. 74 face-to-face courses have been delivered and completed. We also had items from the data team. Board members received a presentation on COVID impacts, including local data sets discussed at the previous meeting, notably local job openings and redundancy submissions, presentation of data on some of the specific questions of the board, such as the impact of COVID-19 on skills demand within job postings and our most deprived communities. We also had an update from the University of Peterborough. Phase 1, which included a timeline for delivery, with doors due to be opened to students in September 2022. Also, labour market intelligence officers reviewed how the data would be shared with schools and how it would be presented in terms of what would be beneficial for career leads and young people. The next Employment and Skills Board will meet on the 19th of January. John T. Hill, my director, will join that meeting to introduce himself to the group. Further updates from Metro Dynamics on labour market information. We are planning introduction of roundtable discussions with the new University of Peterborough provider, who is Anglia Ruskin University, around stakeholder engagement and discussion of emerging curriculum. Thank you for listening. Happy to try and take any questions.
Thank you for presenting. So far, I don't have any questions. Must have been good. Okay. I still have no questions. Does anybody want to answer a question or not? Okay, I don't have anybody. So well done, Janet. You've certainly had a lot to do on your first introduction to the Skills Committee, haven't you?
Yeah.
Well done. So, are you happy to note the update, the Employment and Skills Board, people? I'll propose it. Somebody second it. All gone quiet. Seconder, please. Okay, Chris Seaton, thank you very much. Okay, happy with that? No, nobody objecting? No, unanimous. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
You may now rest. Okay. Yeah. Now can I go over to Vanessa?
Good morning, board. Good, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm coming at the right point this time round.
I've tried to get you on earlier.
I know I wasn't on video, unfortunately, so I couldn't have joined in.
All right.
But thank you very much. Right, normal standing report to the Committee on Finance updates. This month is on the September figures that we have presented. The figures, hopefully the report has given you plenty of detail. There are only two main exceptions to note with regards to potential underspend with regard to the health and care sector and potentially the AEB. There are a couple of areas that we are showing significant underspend so far, but are predicting a year-end budget return as normal, where I have added additional comments in to hopefully provide you with further information on, but I'm happy to take further questions on that if required.
Right, this is the money lady, folks. If you've got any questions, Councillor Niche, come on, man. What do we want some money for?
No, I think I'm really, it's looking at like the next financial year, because if you've already mentioned the healthcare sector pathways, which has been very successful, is in deficit. And I suppose what I'm looking at is next year is, are we looking at reallocating or allocating slightly bigger budgets to some of those areas to help with COVID recovery?
The funding for the Health and Care Sector Academy that we have at the moment is ring-fenced funding from the Department of Work and Pensions. It should have been spent by the end of this financial year. However, we will be reallocating it to the same pilot that is currently running through Peterborough Regional College anyway. And that's in agreement with the Department for Work and Pensions. There's a re-agreed timeline and contract for delivery on that one. So it will continue next year.
For the minutes, I think that is CCP rather than the regional college.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, everybody happy? You happy to note your budget update? Okay, come on. Make sure you're still awake out there, please. Somebody propose. Thank you, Mr. Councillor Niche. Seconded, set by Councillor Seaton. Anybody against it? You got away with it again, Vanessa.
I know.
They're all happy. Right. I think it's just down to me to say the next meeting is on the 11th of January. I think that's right, time, hour and that. And that concludes today's business. Thank you very much. I think it's been a good, constructive meeting. Thank you for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Very
Chair.
much, Chair.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.